Evening, everyone. I'm getting an echo. Just to thank you for coming to this week's Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny meeting here in the Council Chamber. Just a quick housekeeping before we properly get started. Just a reminder that this meeting is recorded, so please do be aware of that in regards to your language. Also, please it is also being live streamed, so there's no way being a live document. Those who are in the chamber and on Teams, please do mute your phones, tablets, Kindles, Echoes, etc., just so that we don't have the background noise. If you are speaking, please do turn on your camera. If you're not speaking, please turn it off and keep yourself muted unless called upon. We've got members in the chamber and some virtually today, so I will come to you as I see you. Just raise your hand if you are virtually. If you are in the chamber, again, indicate. Although be reminded, we do have multiple layers of plastic between us, so I might miss you to start with. Moving on to the actual agenda this evening. First things first, apologies for absence. I believe we've got a few there, haven't we, Callum?
Yes, Chairman. Apologies from Sam Akhtar and Bill Cunnington, and Norman Jorgensen is attending tonight as a substitute.
Yep, and I also had an email from Clive Jones who indicated he is on his way, but will probably be late. So that's fine. Minutes of the previous meeting, pages 5 to 22. We've got two this evening. We've got the first on the 21st of June, and then the other on the 21st of July. So I'll go through the 21st of June first once per page, and basically if there's any points on it. So page number 5 in the agenda pack. 6, 7, 8. Oh, yes.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, there's a couple of details that were going to be sent on to committee members, I think to do with KICS and data relating to antisocial behaviour. Do we know when we might receive those?
Callum?
I believe I've already circulated them, but I will double check, and if I have, I'll resend them, and if not, I'll chase.
Thanks very much. I don't think I've received them actually.
Okay, I'll resend that then.
Okay, thank you.
9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15.
Sorry,
Yep.
Sorry.
Alison.
On page 11, in the 1, 2, 3, fifth paragraph down, about how the council protects itself from cyberware and ransomware attacks. We were told this could be picked up with members separately. So does that mean something isn't going to be sent to everybody on the committee at the meeting when that was raised? I completely understand that perhaps that's something, it's a bit of a part 2, so it wouldn't be detailed in a public meeting, but I haven't heard anything after that meeting.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think with that, Alison, was I believe it was Sam that raised it, and I think what that means is the officer said that if members had specific concerns or if they had ideas, to raise it with the officers directly, rather than sort of in a public forum. I think that's what that meant. It was sort of, if you've got any requests or any concerns, go,
Oh, okay, I read it that the question was raised, but the director would, contact us with an answer separately, not that we had to individually say, well, I'd like very much to be assured of what we're doing.
I can certainly go to the director and the officers and provide an answer for members, but yeah,
that would be great. Thank you.
This was just an indication of what was said on the night.
Thank you, Callum. That's my professional standing. At the back, Anne.
Yes, sorry, a question back on page 8 to do with data sharing. I just wondered, is the data that's shared between the police and the CSP, is that data sort of aggregated and statistical, or is it individual and used operationally?
I would again, I would have to ask the officers for clarification on that. If you wanted more clarification, I can certainly get you an answer.
Yes, please, because it makes a lot of difference to GDPR, doesn't it? Or it could do. Thank you.
Thank you, Norman. Okay, so is everyone in favor? Can I ask for a vote in favour of those minutes on June 21st, please? Okay, all those in favour? That's everyone that was in the meeting, so that's fine. Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, so moving on to the second one, 21st July, which would be page 17. Anne?
Yes, I've got two questions. They're just typos, but they really change the sense. One is at the bottom of page 17, last paragraph, it says, however, it was not felt that the residents working will be better served by an in-house service. So I think that word not, it must be intended to be deleted, I think.
However, it was not felt the residents of Woking would be better served with an yeah, I think that's,
No.
And there's another typo.
Yep.
I can't quite see it at the moment, but it's where a word unilateral is used. Yes, it's near the top of page 18. I think the word universal is meant.
Yeah, the interim director of Place and Grove stated that there was a unilateral thanks.
Unilateral?
Yeah. Second paragraph, page 18.
Okay, right.
No, I was just repeating what I could read here.
Oh, I see what you mean.
It said there was unilateral thanks. And
right.
Universal.
Okay.
Okay. Yep. Alison?
I was present at the meeting and I'm not recorded.
Yeah, that is correct. You were there. Okay. That's the problem. And that's why you need multiple eyes on these, because I missed the unilateral when I read these through as well. And that Alison was missing. Okay, page 18. 19, 20. I'm doing 21 and 22 together as 22 is 3 lines. Okay. Could I have a vote in favour if those minutes are accepted, please? All those in favour? That's everyone in the meeting, but is there anyone, thank you. Is there anyone against or any abstentions? Nope. Okay. Thank you very much. We'll sign them in a minute. Okay. Going back to the proper agenda. So we're going on to declarations of interest. Does anyone have any declarations of interest here? Nope. And so public questions. I believe we had a public question from Mr. Keith Mulvin. Is that correct, Callum? Okay. Keith, do you want to come off mute and turn your video on and ask your question, please?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. My question runs like this. It's been interesting to read in the documents you have in front of you, the document on library enhancement and relocation, as it states clearly the library's added value. The recent consultation about Woking Library, I refer my remarks to Woking Library, states that the new library will have everything that the current library in Denmark Street has, but doesn't specifically mention how those library added things will be delivered. As an example, how to counteract social isolation and poor mental health by coffee mornings, etc., without a cafe and comfortable seating. Recognizing that the new library is due to open next August, will this list of library added value be looked at to see how they can all be provided?
Okay. Thank you, Keith. You're not the only person who's asked me this one recently, but I do have an answer that's been provided by officers and the executive member. The relocation.
Did you want me to answer this one?
Oh, if you want to answer it, Bill, go ahead.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Okay.
If you're here.
Well, I'm here. I mean, you can't see me behind the screen, but I'm here.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Morvan, for your question. The relocation of Wokingham Library, as with the relocation of the Twyford Library and the new micro library within the new Shimfield Community Centre, have the central objective of improving services for our residents. These improvements are both within the core statutory elements of the library service. and the additional value provided through the wide range of events and activities provided by the library service. The relocation of Wokingham Library does not restrict or diminish the ability of the library to provide added value to our residents. The new library has more usable space, that is also more flexible and adaptable, so that it can respond more easily to the changing demands of a modern library service. This is the central reason behind the recent engagement survey for Wokingham Library, so that residents and local community groups have a direct opportunity to communicate their ambitions using the library. In response to the specific question about a cafe, the new Carnival Hub includes space for a cafe for all visitors to use that is larger than the one currently available within the Wokingham Library. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Keith, do you have a supplementary?
Well, I do find this a bit disappointing because clearly the detail of the new library has not really been defined in any clarity. And clearly what one would want to feel comfortable about is that everything that the existing library does is going to continue to be. So, you know, I hear mention of efficiency, but we obviously have, you know, we have this list in your agenda of the additional values and more things as well. Now, that's page 55 and 56. But what I would want is to be confident, and I am not, that these things are actually going to be provided in the way that they currently are provided. In what's said, I agree that yes, there might be a cafe, but is it going to be a cafe that's going to suit casual visitors to satisfy just the point two that I raised earlier on, let alone all the other things? I do think that it needs to be looked at again.
Keith, I think I'm just going to ask from my own personal point of view as the chair here, and then I'll go back to Bill as well. I think what you're referring to and the detail about the offer of the existing library is actually the first what we're going to be talking about later tonight, which is
absolutely
which basically we are looking at what will happen in the future with our library service, because a library and the library service is much more than what we traditionally see as a library in regards to books, facilities, etc. There is much more that it can offer Wokingham from that point of view. So it's a case of what is being offered now. We need to basically try and mirror, and then it's basically enhancing it going forward. That's the purpose of a lot of the documentation and the agenda tonight and how we're going forward. But this is only the first stages. It needs to go further. Bill, am I incorrect in that assumption?
Yeah, you are correct. I mean, the whole point is here that the new facility in the Carnival Phase 2 offers a greater area to start with. I mean, at the moment, we have 133 cubic metres of space in the library, and this will be increased to 285 cubic metres. So a considerably larger area is given over to the library than is it currently available. And with that, I can say that the current services that are offered in the library will be transferred over to the new library. And I hope that there will be additional services as well. I can't say for sure, but that's what I would hope to see, being that there is more space.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for your questions, Keith. Unfortunately, the library provision is towards the end of the meeting, but please do hang around, but get a cup of coffee and listen to everything that's said, because I think this is members of the public will play an important part of what we are doing moving forward with the library.
Just prepare to that comfy cafe at Wokingham Library maybe and do it there, but it's always on YouTube as well, so I might wait for the place. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you, Keith. Right, there was no other public questions, correct, Karen? Was there any member questions? Okay, right. I believe it's item 28, the quick one, which is, well, I say the quick one. The update on local elections. Who's taking that one? Andrew, come on down virtually.
Chairman, good evening, members. So, yeah, pages 23 to 30 in your pack tonight. So this is a look back to May in terms of anything that we can learn around the processes that we used in May and take forward to future elections. But it is also a little bit of a sort of horizon scan as well, looking to not just sort of future elections, but some changes that are proposed in the elections bill, which is currently going through Parliament. So the recommendation for you this evening is just to note the report and the associated improvement actions that are in the report itself, which I'll talk through in a second, but also to advise in terms of any other feedback or any other suggestions that the committee may have this evening. And I should say I came to your committee chair, as you know, twice in the run-up to the local elections, last December and then in February. And I think it was really helpful for myself as the returning officer and my staff to get feedback from this committee. So thank you for that. And it did help us to deliver what I think in terms of the feedback that I've had, given the circumstances of May 21 and having to deliver those elections in a time of very significant public health restrictions, what was a good series of elections. But as I say, I'm keen to hear your feedback this evening, because at all times local elections are such a significant corporate event, and because of sort of the added complexity around COVID, the council's corporate risk register included for a time in the run-up to May the risk around the elections in terms of the successful delivery thereof. So the audit committee, in terms of their remit and their oversight of the council's risk management arrangements, also was very useful in terms of making sure that there was that proper planning and thoroughness in terms of our preparations for May. So as I say, it was very much unprecedented in May. We certainly hope that is the case, and we won't have to run a series of elections with the same level of restrictions that we did in May. But I think it was a tribute to the council itself and the officers and all the people, members as well, in terms of how the elections in the end were delivered. It was very much a one council approach, and I, as returning officer, I had significant support from the chief executive and directors and colleagues right across the council. And there was a real significant additional effort required in those 3 months in particular in the run up to May to make sure that we had all the necessary safeguards and precautions in place. And whilst the election processes themselves in some aspects did look and feel different, I believe that they did meet the key objectives that I had in terms of delivering integrity, confidence in the election processes, transparency, accuracy, as we'd always expect, but most of all in terms of public safety and safety of my staff. I think we achieved all of those things in May. What you've got on the bottom of page 24 and page 25 is a summary of the key learnings that we've put together internally in terms of what we've taken and would like to take forward to future elections from last May. And we really looked at it in terms of the key processes that lead up to polling day itself, and then the count processes that follow immediately thereafter. What I would say though is that there is a lot of more detail behind this, as you might expect, but I've tried to just pull out for the benefit of the committee the key points. So just taking the nominations process, this is probably the first significant process in the lead up to polling day. Obviously, it's important that we get that right and we make that a positive experience for candidates and agents in terms of getting their their nomination papers to us accurately and on time. Again, we had to make some amendments to our usual processes, but actually I think from the feedback that we've had from candidates and agents, those amendments work well. And some of the additional rigour that we put in this time, we'd like to use that in future elections. So, for example, we offered pre-checks prior to the formal submission of papers, which I think was appreciated by particularly by agents. particularly those agents perhaps who had a number of candidates that they were supporting. And also using the more formal than perhaps we have done in the past appointment process for the actual delivery and checking of the nomination papers, again, worked well, just to make sure that we get through that first hurdle in a good way. I then move on to the second area, which is postal voting. So in May, we had quite a significant increase in the numbers of postal voters. This year, our percentages were quite increased, as you might expect, as people took the choice to vote by post rather than go to the polling station on the day. Again, overall, I think the processes worked pretty well. The one thing that we did notice, and this may be because we had quite a significant number of electors who were voting by post for the first time, is that there was a little bit of confusion sometimes, and voters were asking for additional support in terms of how to complete that postal voting pack. It may also have been complicated by the fact that we had the Police and Crime Commissioner election on the same day, and also dependent on where voters were, there were also parish or town elections too. So what we're proposing is to work with our communications colleagues to see what we might do to further support postal voters in the future. That idea perhaps of a video in terms of how to fill in, get the postal vote statement right, but there may be other ideas that this committee has in terms of how we could improve on that in terms of our communications. In terms of polling places, so the venues that we used on the day, as I've already said, there was a lot of effort and planning, health and safety checks, arranging the format of the polling stations inside so that we had one-way systems and safe entrance and exit for voters, and safety for staff as well within the polling stations. But we did need to make a few changes to the usual polling station venues that we used. And in particular, I just want to highlight schools and the use of schools. The borough does only use a very small number of schools nowadays, but I would like to take the opportunity through the autumn, working with the relevant ward members, to look at what changes we might want to make on a more permanent basis moving forwards. You may recall that Council back in February agreed to the redesignation of a small number of polling stations, predominantly around schools, but that was just a temporary redesignation. So I think it's important that we look at that again. And as it says in the report, there was one school in particular where there was a lot of local complaint or local concern around that particular school and the use thereof. And again, particularly given that education had been so disrupted through COVID in the lead up to the elections. And then finally, just the count process as well. So I know some of you in the room there were in the count venues. It was different this year. It went over 3 days, the Friday, the Saturday and the Monday for the Police and Crime Commissioner election. And we also staggered the counts for the borough elections on the Saturday as well. So it did look and feel quite different. But the one thing that we would want to take forward is the daytime count for our local elections moving forwards. Just in terms, so that's the sort of the key points I wanted to raise coming out of May. Just looking forward to future elections. So you'll see at the bottom of page 25, there's just a short table there setting out the scheduled elections that we've got. And you can see for the next 3 years, in May, we've got various scheduled elections, the borough elections each year, but a scheduled parliamentary election and the Police and Crime Commissioner election again in May 2024. I'll just end my introduction, Chairman, if I may, just by referencing the Elections Bill, which had its first reading in Parliament and the House of Commons in July. The headlines from that bill are an appendix from page 27 Probably the most significant item that's had quite a bit of publicity already is around voter identification, voter ID. We're obviously the bill has got a way to go yet through Parliament. We're not quite sure in terms of when the implementation date will be. There will no doubt be some implications for my team in terms of delivering these changes should they all go through as they're set out there. And perhaps, Chairman, I might suggest that when we've got more clarity around timing and when the bill has actually gone through Parliament, you might want me to come back to your committee to talk in a bit more detail about what the implications will be. But I'll leave it there, pause there, Chairman. Very happy to take any questions and any further feedback.
Thank you for that, Andrew. And just to make my own comment, you did a good job and you kept us informed. So thank you to the rest, you and the rest of the team. Alison, you indicated earlier to me about something.
Yes, perhaps in Callum's advice, I'm not sure now if perhaps I should have made a declaration at the beginning of the meeting that during the elections I was employed as an election agent. I was employed rather than just doing it as a volunteer, so I didn't know if that should be a declaration.
I think we can note it down, but I think you're still fine to participate, Alison.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'd like to add my thanks very much to Andrew and all of the team. Sam certainly stepped up and did a brilliant job. There was just one particular polling station in Norrie's ward. They only had one polling station for the entire, all the polling districts. And I know some people had raised that although that was seemed to be a good idea for COVID, it isn't going to work very well in the future because it was a fair distance for people at the other ends of the ward. So I hope that one's certainly going to be looked at. Thank you.
Yeah, yes, Chairman, if I could just respond. Yeah, I'm aware of that, and I think that will be a one-off. So all being well, we'll be back to more usual arrangements in Norrie's ward in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Guy. Yes, thanks very much for the presentation as well. Yeah, overall, I think the election process appears to work really well, including the count during the daytime. And I'd actually support that for the future. It's really nice to actually go the next day and feel refreshed and alert. And big thank you to all the officers involved as well. It was certainly during a very difficult period. One area I am concerned about, though, and we have brought it up before, is the use of schools. And how likely will it be for May 2022 that we will not be using schools for polling stations?
Well, if I look at the 4 schools that up until May this year that we have used historically, so it is just 4 schools to put this into context. Each of those 4 schools I'd like to, as it says in the report, undertake a review with ward members over these next few months with a view to reporting back to full council early in 2022. I can't answer specifically the question that you've got there, Paul, but I'm very aware of the concerns that exist amongst certain parts of the community, and it's always been my intention not to disrupt education or to disrupt as little as possible. So we've certainly striven over the years to reduce the number of schools that we use, and I would be hopeful that through this further review over these next few months we may be able to reduce that even further.
Have you considered feedback? Have you considered using, say, school fields or something like that with a marquee, so at least the buildings are still open, which then still allows the students to attend the school?
Yeah, marquees were absolutely something that we considered in the run-up to May. Certainly was one of the schools we were we were proposing that, but for various reasons that didn't work out. But that's certainly one of the options we have in the past. Used the marquee at one of the schools. Yeah, all options are very much on the table. If we can't find an alternative location to, as I said earlier, to avoid as much disruption as possible for the school.
Thank you, Paul. Norman, I saw next indicate.
Thank you. I think on that, for polling stations, the thing with some schools is that they're the most obvious public building in some particular wards. So I think we need to keep them in consideration in that sense. I think that's important. The points I wanted to raise really were around the postal voting. I mean, clearly there was a huge increase in postal votes this time, which was expected, but it was good to see. I think, as you alluded to, there were some people seem to be a little bit confused about the number of bits of paper and which bits of paper went in which envelopes in which order, and I detected a bit of a problem with that with some residents. So it'd be interesting just to look at the sense of the instructions, I suppose. It should be better as time goes on if more people are getting used to postal vote. I guess part of the problem was so many people were coming to it for the first time this time. I just wonder also, it's an interest really. Were there a significant number of postal votes that arrived after the polling day? I noted that there were quite a lot of polling. There were quite a lot delivered in the last 2 or 3 days of the election. So I guess there must have been some that didn't quite make it. I just wondered if it was significant.
I'm not. I mean, I haven't got the numbers, Norman. But in all elections, there's always a case that people do miss the deadline. We do have significant numbers of people, quite surprisingly, actually go to the polling station on the day with their postal vote pat because they want to make sure that their vote counts, and as long as we get it through the polling station, then it will count. But I don't believe there was any particular pattern of any significant increase of postal votes coming in after the deadline this year.
Okay, thank you. Shirley, then Anne.
Thank you. Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Andrew. I also have some questions about postal voting. You said there was a significant increase in the number of electors. I mean, was it sort of double what we'd normally have, would you say, or have you got any indication on how many were?
It wouldn't be double, but I would say just in sort of perhaps round numbers, 30-40% increase. So it was a significant increase.
That's fine. And I wonder whether you're able to tell whether, because when you elect to do postal voting, you can select to do one-off or going forward. And I just wondered if you know whether a lot of those are going to just drift back to being non-postal voters next year because they just did it for a one-off, or have you got figures on that?
I don't, but I could get some figures for the committee on that. It's a good question. I was going to say, just in terms of the elections bill, you might have noticed that one of the provisions that the government has got in the bill is to reduce the amount of time that people can elect to have a postal vote for. So at the moment, the law says that there's a refresh every 5 years, but that's being reduced to 3 years in the elections bill. But I haven't got those particular stats, but I'll follow that up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And just one final one, if I may. Obviously, you talked about some further training being required because there was confusion about how to fill things in. Was there a significant percentage of spoiled papers or papers that couldn't be counted because they hadn't been correctly filled in?
Again, probably not any marked increase, but and again, it would be the usual issues that people had. So, for example, on the postal vote statement, forgetting to sign it. instead of putting their date of birth, putting the date that they were signing the postal vote statement. So those are the sort of the typical errors, if you like, that people make. And you know, I do understand that it is a relatively sort of complicated process. The instructions are very prescribed as well. I've got very little leeway as the returning officer to actually change the descriptions that go on the postal vote statement, but it's looking around the edge of that, as I say in the report, to see what else we might do to be able to help people. But I wouldn't, maybe I've sort of overemphasized this point. I wouldn't say that this was a significant problem as such. I think it's just indicative of the fact that more people took up the option to postal vote this time, and probably for the first time. And I wouldn't expect the same problem next time, particularly if we can do some more in terms of communicating how to fill it in.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anne.
Good evening. Yes, I thought the election was well handled, I must say. I wanted to just review what Alison was saying. I did meet a voter who specifically didn't vote because it was going to be a long walk to the polling station for her, and she didn't have sufficient mobility, so that was specifically why she didn't vote. So one question is, so obviously the government plans to check the photo ID of voters who turn up in person, but there won't be such a check for postal voters, I think, will there? So is that offset by being very certain about where they live? Do you think?
Yeah, well, there are all the postal votes that come in are subject to checks, so they're checked against the postal vote application form. Their signature is, as is their date of birth. So there's already a degree of, quite a significant degree of checking against the application form that the postal voters are required to provide.
Oh, right. Okay. And the other thing, on page 30, the last paragraph, I just don't understand what are digital imprints and what must be done with them, and what is organic material.
I was hoping you weren't going to ask me that. And I think this is around political campaigners specifically. But I can, if you allow me, I'll give you a written answer on that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Anne. I think the only thing I would like to add is that I think it would be nice to, you can reply as this is a written answer, Andrew, but I would like to know how many postal votes we did get back in late after polling day, just out of curiosity, because I know that there was some challenges at the Reading Youth Distribution Centre, so I didn't get posts for a week and a half at one point. So it'd be interesting to know that. Hopefully we won't have these problems next year, but it'd just be interesting to see. So if you could just find that and ping it around an email, that'd be much appreciated.
Okay.
Alison?
Could we also know the number that were rejected?
Again, written, if that would be possible, Andrew.
Yeah.
But all in all, I think once again, you did a very good job. I've not heard anyone, especially from the member side, who was dissatisfied with what was done. You kept us in the loop. That's all we can ask for. And yeah, let's just keep going. And if hopefully next year we won't have to put up with the COVID restrictions, I still think having the count the day after isn't a bad idea at all, because at least allows us to get a bit of sleep. But if we do need to put in restrictions again for COVID reasons, etc., I just ask that you come back and just give us an update when the time comes, but we won't know that until February anyway.
Sure. No, I'll be very happy to do that.
Okay. Right. Thank you very much. I think you can disappear then, Andrew, from that point of view, and we'll move on to item number 29, the broadband provision, I think. Who's taking that one?
Yeah, I'd like to do the introduction if I may, Guy, but I'm ably assisted by Grant and Lynn Wilson. I'd just like to say that this has been an ongoing situation for a long time as we try and back up the non-commercial broadband provision across the borough, in fact, across all of the unitary authorities in Berkshire. So rather than to go into the detail, I'm going to hand over to the experts who know much more about the day-to-day situation here as we tackle the harder to get to places.
Thank you. Welcome, Grant.
Thank you, Stuart. Good evening to members of the committee. This report has been brought forward at the request of the committee to ask what is being done to ensure that every resident has access to high quality broadband. I'm pleased to introduce Lynn, who's the project and programme manager for digital projects across Berkshire. And she's kindly agreed to give up some of her time to attend tonight because as one might anticipate, there's quite a lot of technical stuff around broadband and the way the market works. So Lynn is here to add her wealth of expertise and hopefully be able to answer any questions that the committee may have. I was going to assume that the report had been read, and if that's okay with the committee, I'm just going to run through the presentation that sort of reflects what's in the report.
Feel free, Grant.
So if I share my screen, hopefully that will work.
Oh, sorry.
So is that okay for everybody?
It's come up on our point of view. So it will be broadcast as well.
Okay, so as I say, this really sort of summarises what's in the report. So it's useful to understand where we're starting from, really, or where we are at the moment. So this slide gives current broadband coverage, and helpfully, because the terminology does get a little bit confusing, the colour coding refers to superfast, ultrafast, gigabit and full fibre. Obviously, as time has moved on and technology has progressed, what used to be superfast isn't actually very superfast anymore. So this sort of graphic illustration shows where Wokingham is in comparison to Berkshire and the UK. And when we think about Wokingham as a sort of mix of rural and urban areas, existing coverage bears up fairly well, really, compared to Berkshire as a whole and compared to the UK. But you will note that in Berkshire as a whole, the level of full fibre is actually quite low, although there is quite a significant level of gigabit capable coverage via Virgin Media. But as people know, the superfast project for Berkshire, as was started a few years ago, well, quite a number of years ago, but phase 3 in particular impacted on Wokingham in terms of the current superfast Berkshire project. That project had Openreach providing to sort of the more urban areas and GigaClear providing to the more rural areas. I think it's fair to say there were significant teething troubles with that contract and delivery, but over the last 12 months or so, GigaClear in particular have really upped their game in terms of putting in the infrastructure and the backhaul required to deliver service. So this summarises across the different parts of Wokingham where we're currently at, what's ready for service, what's not ready for service, but there's still a planned completion date for this project by April of 22.
Just quickly on this one, Grant, the numbers being referred to here, I assume they're properties, correct?
Yes, that's right. I mean, this is residential properties, yeah. So that's where we are with the superfast Berkshire project in terms of the current position. Obviously, things have moved on, and the ambition now is to get gigabit capable broadband across most of the vast majority of the country. As set out in the report, it's anticipated that 80% of that will be through commercial provision. And there will be about a 20% amount where it will require some form of government subsidy or other initiative to stimulate the market to provide to areas that aren't commercially viable. And we'll come on to some of those initiatives a little bit later. So the next two maps really sort of illustrate the point that the existing plans, commercial plans for key providers locally, that's City Fibre and Openreach, do cover extensive parts of Wokingham in terms of their current plans, but equally there are significant gaps. Sorry, go back again. So that's the planned coverage for City Fibre and their firm plans. And then the plan for Openreach, again, looking to build out between April of next year and April 25 across significant parts of the borough, but again with some gaps. Now, the key mechanism for filling the majority of those gaps is the government's initiative called Project Gigabit, which is where they want to deliver gigabit connectivity to the 20% nationally that won't be provided for by the commercial providers as a matter of course. Now that 20% UK figure is probably lower in Wokingham because that that 20% includes parts of very, very remote areas of Cornwall, Scotland, Cumbria and those sorts of locations. But there will still be a significant number of properties within Wokingham that won't be provided for through commercial plans. The government has, for this phase of its Project Gigabit, determined that it will centrally procure the contracts to address this gap in provision. So that's through BD UK. And we now know, this is quite a recent announcement, and in the background papers there are links through to this so you can look into more detail. The Wokingham is in phase 2 and is the country's been divided into geographical lots. And we're in lot 26, which covers East Berkshire, Buckinghamshire, and I think parts of Hampshire. And that procurement is due to begin in May 22, with contracts expected to commence in April 23. But as set out in the report, whilst those plans are in place, there are issues about both, in relation to the speed of commercial provision. And we know that nationally, commercial providers are under pressure in terms of sheer capacity around labour and resources to be able to deliver quickly. So the Digital Infrastructure Group has moved on from a focus on the superfast broadband project to look more towards the future and how it might encourage the market to prioritise delivery in Berkshire over and above other areas of the country and deliver as quickly as possible. So this is the sort of vision on a page for the Digital Infrastructure Group. And a lot of this is about working with the market to stimulate demand, to remove barriers for installation of infrastructure required, and to try and ensure that Berkshire is attractive by having a sort of a consistent landscape across the patch so that the commercial providers can move at pace. I don't know, Lynn, whether you want to say anything further about the infrastructure group's vision.
I'm happy to explain a little more about this if people want detail, unless you want to take questions first. What would you prefer?
I personally don't mind because I know a lot about this stuff because it's of my career. I feel if you do a bit of explanation and then we can go into some questions, I think that's going to be the best bet.
Okay, happy to. So this has been built, a digital strategy plan has been underway since about mid last year, and it was put to the chief executives across all 6 local authorities in January, who agreed for what was previously the Superfast Broadband Board to transition into the Digital Infrastructure Group across Berkshire. And from that, there were 4 targets that you can see, and that was to increase Berkshire's full fibre coverage to 95% by 2025, to eliminate 4G not spots by 2022, to establish a 5G testbed and small cell rollout by 2023. And when we've put up here, eliminate digital poverty, we won't entirely eliminate it, but we want to go a long way towards doing as much of that as we can. those 4 particular targets are being worked on with different types of projects, and that some of the local authorities are currently involved in. So some of you will be involved in Dig Once, which is one of the projects that's come out of this. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see the 3 green, they're all projects. There's 4 ideas, which are up there in red. The other 3 on there are all currently underway. The recent one, the second one down, you can see the MHCLG, which is a full fibre project to schools, fire stations, doctor surgeries. And that has literally just been awarded last week, and that does cover all 6 local authorities as well. And then on the left-hand side, that's more strategic elements. So all of those strategic elements need to be in place for us to reach the targets and goals on there. And at the bottom, you'll see some of the funding sources that we've got it from in the middle. We have the assistance of a consultant that has taken that left-hand column, and we've changed it, put it into an implementation plan. That implementation plan has 6 working streams, and we have been underway with that maybe for about the last 3 months. So it's still quite high level, it's still coming together. But I think there's going to be some great initiatives that will come out of this that will, as Grant said, make Berkshire across the board more attractive to all of the suppliers and digital investors out there, which in turn obviously would benefit ourselves and all of our local economies.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions on this? Shirley first, please.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you for the presentation. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. One is about the gigabit voucher scheme, insofar as what I understand with that is that can empower local communities who can buy into that, and a group of people in a particular village or a particular even group of streets can buy into that off their own bat, if you like. How are we advertising that to our rural communities? I looked up on some other council websites out of curiosity today and found that some are actually actively promoting this on their website for residents. And I just wondered if that was a route that Wokingham would be going down. So that's the first question. And the second question is about these on the slide that was just up with the items in red. And I noticed that one of the ideas is ultra fast provision for social housing, which I would absolutely support 150%. It occurs to me that we've got a big social housing project going on with the Gorse Ride regeneration. And so I'd quite like this really to move from an idea to being a plan at breakneck speed, really. And I wondered if that was happening. Thank you.
Grant, do you want to say something, or do you want me to pitch in?
Yeah, I think Rhiannon will talk to Gorse Ride, and she's put a hand up. In relation to promoting vouchers and to rural communities, I think yes, we will want to do more around promoting that. And we're also potentially talking with Connecting Communities Berkshire about how they might outreach into our more rural communities and promote that directly in terms of their engagement with parishes and village halls and those sorts of things. So I think yes, that is an aspiration.
And I'll say, yes, we have done it in certain areas with regards to particular contracts. We have gone as far as to write to some residents. We do put updates on the Superfast broadband website, but obviously, as you can appreciate, we're transitioning from that into Berkshire Dig. So we have actually got a new staff member starting to help with the comms around that, so we can get more of it out. But we have contacted some residents directly. We've also contacted parish councils and made them aware, but not this recent one. This is the most recent gigabit that we do need to do some extra work on that. And I know Rhiannon is probably going to answer it, but with regards to the ultra provision to social housing, one of the projects that has come out of the dig recently, in as much as it hasn't been put to board yet, but in order, part of the elimination of digital poverty, we are actually working through what that looks like. What is digital poverty? Is that a deficit of infrastructure, or things like offering particular tariffs to social housing, etc. And so that is something that is way on, it's there, but it's just been pulled together by a sub team. And I do think you might have had somebody from Wokingham there. I'm pretty sure you did. And so that will go to board in September.
Thank you for that. Just one thing, when you were talking about the voucher scheme, it's also available, I believe, for businesses as well as residents. So it's important that businesses in rural areas get notified about it as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, because yeah, they get slightly more. So the aim is everybody, businesses, you know, SMEs and residential owners can basically claim for a voucher in order to then go to a provider and have them installed. Obviously, the more you get, the less likelihood is that you would have to pay something. If there's only a small amount in the area, then sometimes the subsidy is still required from the residents or businesses. The more they get, they can actually get it basically to nil, you know, if they get enough people together collectively. And so that's worked really well in some areas.
I was just going to add, Shirley, really around Gorse Ride and the conversations that we've had with the steering group and the residents down there, that it's a really good opportunity to make sure that they get some really good broadband into that development. And had a discussion earlier with Lynn today to suggest that we'd be very happy for that to be a perhaps a trial project or an exemplar project for some of the work that we could do, and we know that the residents as well are very keen to put themselves forward for that.
Thank you.
Very interesting. I believe I saw Norman's hand go up, and then I'll go to Paul.
Hi, thank you. You say in the report and the presentation, obviously a lot of this is going to be done by commercial operations. I just wonder how much you think will be left that needs some sort of public subsidy, and what sort of financial provision needs to be made for that. There's figures in here of grants that are available, but I'm not sure, are those going to be sufficient? What's the sort of financial context of this to get this done pretty quickly?
I mean, I think the primary source of finance is you know, the main gigabit initiative from government, in terms of it's a government objective, and as I say, that they're providing the funding and letting the contracts, which will deal, we hope, with the vast majority of those not connected commercially.
So you say vast majority. I mean, what sort of percentage do you think is going to be left, and where it is going to be? I guess Woking Borough, compared with a lot of parts of the country, is pretty densely populated. I know there's parts that are not quite so, but I would imagine that you know, hopefully there'll be only a small number that are left, if any.
I mean, at this point, you know, because the contracts haven't been let or properly scoped, I think it's quite difficult to come up with an absolute percentage. Maybe what we can do is I can have some further conversations with Lynn around that and just see what we think is likely in terms of an outturn.
We can get some more information as Grant said at a later date. From government figures, central government, they have said 85% by the year 2025, and then they'll look at the remaining 15. We've set Berkshire's objective to be slightly higher than that at 95, as you can see. There is currently an OMR going on, as Grant alluded to. We're part of the Gigabit project for phase 2, and the OMR has been launched. It was launched mid-August. That will go on till mid-September. So once we get that back, we'll have a little bit more of an idea, because as you can imagine, there's quite a lot of competing priorities of different programs going on, and the commercial market has actually moved quite quickly. So I know they're going for 85%, and then the remaining 15. But obviously we'll work as hard as we can to try and get that number as low as we can. For Superfast, we are in the west part, and the east will hopefully be the same. We are at 99% for Superfast. So, and once we finish with the east, we should be in similar numbers. So I know it's certainly something that we would continue to drive as best as we can.
Okay, it would be useful to have sort of more information, I think, on the availability, potential availability of grants, how the commercial companies are going, and what is left, what might be likely to be left to do, how much that would cost, and therefore to see whether there's a gap that might need to be plugged by someone. That would just be interesting to see once you've got that information. If that's going to be in a month or two time, that'd be good. Thank you.
I hope in a couple of months we might have it. Hope so.
Yeah, this is very important, but I'll get on to some of my questions later. Paul.
Thank you, Grant and Lynn, for your presentation and report. On page 32, the strategy sets an explicit target to increase full fibre coverage in Berkshire by 95% to the end of 2025, for a current baseline of 13.86%. But in reality, when GigaClear rolled out a phase where I live in Willish Ward, there was a gap of over 18 months between laying the cables and the apparatus before we had the offer to actually take up their service, and that was in the autumn of 2020. As there's around 4 years between now and the end of 2025, we're a bit sceptical on how that 95% target is going to be achieved, and based on what GigaClear have done previously. So what's different going forward?
And Grant, do you want me to pitch in?
Yeah, I think that's fine. What I would say is that there were particular issues, I think, with GigaClear as a provider in the early years, and that's we've got to accept that. We don't know at this point who will win the contract, so who the provider will be. One would hope that we wouldn't have the same problems over again. But Lynn, anything to say?
So yeah, you're right. There were issues. I don't think the industry realised how difficult it would be and how lengthy it would be to get fibre in. It wasn't just with GigaClear. There were other providers that have struggled as well with the timelines. I think it's going to be different because there's been lessons learned, firstly. I think also they are now using more PIA, so that's passive infrastructure access, which basically means they will use existing ducts and poles. So instead of digging the ground up, they're going to use existing infrastructure that's there, which is making it quicker. I also think, sorry, going back to your questions, what will be different? I think there's been lessons learned from a contractual perspective with BDUK as to how they will actually manage them. And I think there's an awful lot more providers out there right now, suppliers out there trying to actually do this. I think as well, I think with your particular issue in Winnish, I'd need to look up specifically, but you'll see when Grant put the presentation together, there were some that weren't actually ready for service. Well, there's a lot that's actually been built. So, for example, I know that in Finchampstead East, there's another 190 properties being built, but they can't be lit up because there's a backhaul route that needs connecting. So it's like having a kettle, but not having anywhere to plug it into. And so some of it will continue to kind of light up like a Christmas tree, for want of a better word, when they actually plug it in. And so I think in your area, I suspect there would have been either backhaul issues or wayleave issues, which potentially could have been a result of some not so great planning in that area. So I think a lot of lessons have been learned, and actually the East Berkshire build has gone significantly better than the West Berkshire, and it is moving along quite rapidly. So that would be my thoughts on it.
Yeah, just thank you for that. And just really one other question. You said about resources, and there's more resources out there now, but isn't there a draw across the whole country for the same thing?
I think there are more suppliers out there. We do have on our risk register, obviously with regards to COVID and civils gangs, and there is a risk there that there may not be. We haven't actually ran into that on a large scale. Yeah, obviously there's been an odd gang that's been off sick, but it's continuing to progress from where we are now. But you're right, going forward, even though there are more players in the game, there could be a potential issue going forward with regards to access to the amount of, you know, gangs, civil gangs on the ground. So yes, you're right, that is something we have to manage.
Thank you, Paul. I think right now the issue is not necessarily going to be putting the cables in the ground. I think it's the actual back end and the chips required to fuel that back end that's going to be any delays. Alison, did you indicate?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it is, you know, it is quite shocking that Superfast Berkshire was launched 10 years ago and we're a long way from achieving that still. You know, we were told we've hit 99.5% in 2013 and, you know, the ultra fast is now not fast at all. Just some questions from page 34, please. You spoke about the voucher offer. How is Woking and Borough Council sharing the info with our residents? You know, how do our residents know that they can apply for this? And then there's mention of there is a risk that they'll focus their attentions in limited capacity elsewhere. What are we doing to mitigate this risk? Thank you.
So thank you. So I think we talked about the need for further promotion of vouchers and whatever. So that's something we'll need to pick up.
Chairman, I'm sorry. Could I ask Grant to speak up because I can't hear him very clearly?
I do apologise. Is that better?
It's a bit better. We might need to put you up on our end. On second, Grant, we're fiddling around with the speaker. Try now.
How's that? Any better?
I think what's happening is as you're moving your head around, you're basically losing the connection from the microphone that's obviously in your laptop, and that's what's happening. It says that's what I think.
Keep still.
Yes.
Okay, I'll keep still. No, sorry. So yes, in terms of promotion, so the government's quite recently launched that latest voucher scheme, and we do need to pick that up in terms of promotion to our residents, fully accepted. So we need to look at that. In relation to, if you like, our relative position with regard to other parts of the country and priority, that's really the work that DIG is undertaking around trying to make sure that we're engaging with the suppliers, that they see Berkshire as an attractive place, and that we're putting in place across Berkshire, as far as possible, sort of common approaches and a standard way of doing things, so it makes it easier for them to come here than in other places where it might be more complicated. So trying to work with the suppliers and with the market so that they see Berkshire as an attractive place to invest early.
And if I can speak to mitigating the risk. Yeah, is that okay? Oh, sorry, I thought somebody else spoke. Now, if I can speak to mitigating the risk, we are actually working with our current suppliers right now. I know there are additional resources that have been trained and they're running kind of like apprentice programs within that to try and get more people in. Obviously, that part is going to take a while. They're actually looking at getting contracts with more than one kind of contractor / subcontractor, so they have other places to move to if they need to. They also are looking at things like simplifying some of the routes, like I said, using existing infrastructure like PIA to try and you know, reduce the amount of dig, and then it is actually on our risk register, and we have weekly meetings with our suppliers and we monitor the work, and obviously they are aware. Sorry, I don't know the gentleman's name who talked about some of the parts. We do know that at one point reinstatement materials might have been an issue, but right now we seem to be okay. But that is something that we look at and address with our suppliers every week, and monitor the progress.
Thank you for that. Anything else, Alison? Does anyone else have any questions before I let loose? Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. It's more of a comment, actually. Although you've got the no dig option, that may well be pretty limited. And I think one of the big issues is going to be road space availability.
And that is something that we're looking at within Dig Once as to how are there ways that we can get suppliers to share. And also we're looking at implementing a Dig Once policy where we are going to try and do a pilot on basically trying to dig the road up once. So when other people are in there, if there's major works going on with utility providers, that we can utilise that time as well and allow other people to get in it. Obviously, that will be something. It's very early days. It hasn't gone through board. It hasn't been passed through members. It hasn't been approved yet, but there are things that we're looking at like that, anticipating those types of things as to what we can do to try and mitigate against that and make it easier.
Thank you. Well, this is very interesting so far, especially if the super fast, with it being 24 meg, being in action for over 10 years now. I've got a couple of points, comments and questions here. The first question is, once we've got the current information on page, well, the third page of the presentation where we got the actual numbers of housing to be completed by GigaClear and OpenReach respectively, how many houses will we have left that do not have the 24 meg superfast service minimum? That's the first question. The second question is much more around looking forward to the future, because consumers are leading the charge, but with us going into the new normal post-COVID world, as we are sitting here this evening with you guys, guys and girls, remote on the phone, us sitting here in the chamber, and someone with a rather exotic background basically potentially actually being in that exotic location in the future as opposed to just being an image. What can we do? Because businesses are very much leading the charge here as well. And one major FTSE company is basically turning around and saying their network in the future will be a laptop, a phone, and a 5G connection that you connect to. And that will be your corporate network effectively. So the 5G aspect is that being considered as part of the filling the gap for some of these properties going forward? And the final point on this is applications are also leading the charge. So I know that we're talking about putting full fiber in and everything like that, but 24 megs, especially with the advent of streaming services, and the consumers will vote with their feet, as it were, and they will demand improved 5G connection, improved Wi-Fi, improved broadband connections as well. What concerns me is effectively are the suppliers aware of the demand that this is creating? I think that's enough from me, because otherwise I could be here all night and bore everyone to tears, because I work in this industry, not directly for this part of broadband provision, but I work for one of the manufacturers, just not in this sector. I just know the teams.
Grant, did you want to? I'm happy to pitch in after. Or I can go first.
Yeah, go on, Lynn.
So how many's left with regards to once we finish superfast broadband? I will need to get the specific stats from you, and we have got that, and I can come back to you so we can actually look at what properties weren't reached. Most of those potentially wouldn't have been reached, possibly due to wayleave refusals. And then to actually try and access them via another way would end up in such an extortionate cost that it wouldn't meet the value for money criteria set out by BD UK. So I would suspect they are the reasons, and we have worked with yourselves, Grant, to actually try and obtain as much of those wayleaves as we can. But obviously, if the landowner says no and we can't access another way, So just up front, that's likely the majority of the reason. But I will get those statistics, talk to Grant and get them over to you. And obviously we will be looking at those as well. Wokingham, given that you have GigaClear as your provider, GigaClear only offer full fibre. So anybody that was picked up on that contract would have got the higher speeds anyway, or the capacity for the higher speeds. Some of the other contracts would have only just got the 24 megabits. That would have been it. So you're partially already upgraded there, which is why you would have potentially, once they're finished, you'll have a much higher full fibre / gigabit number than some of the other places across Berkshire. Yes, 5G is being looked in, it's been considered. That vision on a page, it's very new. Like I said, it's just been picked up. There are competing priorities within that. But in September, our board, I've arranged for a kind of leader in 5G to actually come and talk to the board about 5G and the benefits that can be derived from that. And then we hope after that, obviously projects and papers on way how we can move it forward and communicate that and get our stakeholders involved. But that is very early days, but yes, it is on the horizon. And I think they are. I mean, we're going to be doing some mass market, so for the suppliers being aware about the demand they're creating, I think so. I can't answer that, with any fullness other than, we do have regular contact with the market, and we are actually looking to consolidate that collectively for any of the local authorities, any of the 6 that would like to be part of that, so that we can do some market engagement days and actually feedback to them some of the issues that we're having, and actually, as Grant said, collect the information from them as to what best practices they would like to see to make Berkshire a more attractive place for them to invest. So we've started it, but again, we need to move forward with something more formal and more official.
Okay, thank you for that. That actually covers off quite a lot, and it is forward things, so I'm happy with that. One final question, this is just my own sanity, and that's where we're on the work stream, so the final page of the presentation. Exploit and develop the Berkshire LoRa-WAN. So the LoRa, I don't know, but what I know, WAN is wide area network. So what's the LoRa-WAN, please?
The LoRa-WAN as a network was put in as part of the Smart Cities project, and I think the LoRa bit of it is just low resolution. So it's a sort of a network that's been put in as part of the Smart Cities project. And the idea is that uses of that, basically Internet of Things. So the thing about the LoRa-WAN is it can't transmit, high volume streaming or anything, but it can work with a range of sensors and those sorts of things. So it's really about the Internet of Things and exploiting that network that's now been put in right across Berkshire. Originally, it was 4 authorities who were part of the Smart Cities project originally. So that was Reading, West Berkshire, Bracknell and Wokingham. So Wokingham has been part of that Smart Cities project from the start. And then in the last year, Slough and Windsor and Maidenhead were added in, so the LoRa network was extended right across Berkshire. So there's a network there that functions, and it's really about working out how we can derive benefit from that on a range of sort of applications that it's suited for. But obviously very different to superfast broadband or 5G. It's a different sort of purpose to that LoRa-WAN network, but it does exist.
So, for example, one local authority is using it to put sensors in their bins, and so they can actually recognise which, trash can or which bins in the villages are being used, not being used, which ones are being used more, and they can go as far as to kind of miss some of those off their particular routes, which would actually make things more efficient. So there's lots of kind of smaller projects like that. Some in adult social care, in sensors, whether people are doing things or for safety, and you can check to make sure your relatives are all right. Those kind of, I think they're using some of the sensors to see if somebody maybe had fallen down or something like that. But there's quite a lot of those kind of smaller projects being ran across other local authorities. yeah, we haven't got anybody together on that, Laura Ann. It's just, as Grant said, it's an area that everybody's working in. So it would be something that would be good to collaborate on at some point, especially with the IoT.
Yeah, that's the way you need to move to in the future, especially with on the IoT thing. I know that one company is basically using smartwatches in a manufacturing facility to basically track where their employees are in case of a disaster. So crashing, the building comes crashing down, they know exactly where everyone was in the building at that exact moment, things like that. So yeah, definitely exploit and develop that and reach out to members and anyone for ideas from that point of view, because there's a lot we can do with that, especially with climate change and climate emergency planning in there. Does anyone have any further questions? Because I think I could be done, keep going, but I'm not going to. Nope, nothing from that. So I think we can move on. So thank you very much, everyone. That was very interesting personally. Look forward to hearing back and getting some of those answers that you promised in writing, just so we can get the numbers in a bit more information. But thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. So moving on. Thank you. So moving on to item number 30, which is the library provision service. I believe Bill is starting this one off, and then we're going to Mark, I believe, on the phones.
Thank you very much. Well, at the start of the pandemic, it became necessary to restrict the opening of our libraries across the borough in line with government legislation. To assist our residents, we increased our online services, and our main three libraries, Wokingham, Woodley and Lower Earley, were able to open with time restrictions and offering a click and collect service. At this time, many of our staff were redeployed to surge testing. On the 14th of July, the government announced the lifting of restrictions on the lifting restrictions on the 19th. And I must say, thanks to the hard work of our officers and our library staff, we were able to reopen our branches on Monday the 19th, having completed safety initiatives to protect our staff and visitors. During lockdown, all computers and software were replaced and upgraded. Well, we're now back to normal running. And whilst many authorities are closing libraries, here in Wokingham, we're investing in new and improved libraries, offering our residents a better experience. Over the last 2 years that figures have been available, it shows an increase in borrowed items of 3.33%. This is against drops in all other Berkshire boroughs. In February, planning approval was given for the go-ahead for the new Twyford Library in the old Polehampton Boys' School, and with extensive work to take place, this will open in the spring of 2022. The new Shimfield Library, to be in the new community centre, is now due to open at the end of this month or early October. And added to this is the relocation of our main Wokingham Library into the new Carnival Phase 2 site around August 2022. I believe that having gone through the most difficult time here in Wokingham, we can be proud of the services we have been able to offer and for the future plans of our library service. I think now's the time to hand over to Mark, who's got some more detailed figures and information for us. So Mark, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Chair. I've got a short presentation to share, if that's okay with everyone. I'll just get this up.
Yep, go ahead.
You can see from the screen that's sharing.
Yeah, that's coming through, so it will be broadcasting now as well.
Brilliant. So this is a few slides. Obviously, there's the report that's been provided that has a fair amount of information in it, but I think some of the headlines just make you aware of. As Councillor Sohn alluded to, the national picture is that the usage of libraries is in decline. That's both a national picture and a picture within Berkshire. Apart from Wokingham, it's pleasing to say. You can see in that local picture graph how we've got a steady trajectory of increasing library visits since 2012-13 up until 2019-20. That dip that we saw in 18-19 was when we unfortunately had to move out of the Maiden Early school and the library that we had there. our Twyford Library was closed for a couple of months for repairs, and there was the town centre regeneration. Whilst that looks like a big dip, that is quite a short scale in that, and you see, so if we look at that perhaps with a slightly larger scale, actually the impact wasn't that great overall. We still were, over 450,000 visits for that year. We're also seeing an increase in items loaned, but what's also really pleasing about that is that we're diversifying, and that we're still seeing strong usage of the library in terms of lending library and borrowing books, but we're seeing more people access our online services, particularly things like e-magazines and those types of things. We do offer a very wide range of services within our libraries. On the left-hand side there, you'll see quite a long list of things that we do in terms of going beyond just basically lending of books. Part of the library offer that we developed in 2016 was what every resident can expect when they visit every library. So to some degree, everything of the core elements of our library service is available in each of our libraries. So there's a lending library, there are study areas, there are computers to use, there's a children's area, there'll be activities and events. It makes it so there's a consistent picture for what residents can expect. One thing we know, because residents tell us quite regularly, is they still visit libraries primarily to borrow books, and you can see that in terms of the reason for visits graph on the right hand side. But obviously we want to make sure that our libraries are well-used spaces and making sure they do come along for all the events, activities, and in some cases other council services that we do offer. We have quite a good mix in terms of the distribution of libraries across the borough. The map which was produced and isn't the greatest to see, but hopefully you can see it on your computers when I share this. We've got a good spread across the main sort of urban areas across the borough, both in terms of our existing libraries and the libraries that we're relocating. Although Woking Library is relocating a grand total of about 300 metres away from the current site. But what's really exciting and interesting is the new micro library in Shinfield. This will be something that is a new approach to delivering a library that we haven't taken in the borough before, having something be completely within a community facility, actually next to the cafe area, in a much more sort of almost informal approach to the management of the library, particularly with the introduction of the intelligent shelving, which means that people can just put things back on the shelves and those returns will automatically be logged into the system. You don't need to use the self-service. In terms of also ensuring our availability across the borough, we are doing the works with the libraries that I mentioned. We are expanding our virtual offer, so ebooks, audiobooks, e-newspapers, e-magazines and virtual events have all increased significantly during the period of the library offer, and it's fair to say significantly in the last 18 months. It's been really pleasing to see how many people have gone to the online services as an alternative, but also equally as pleasing to see that as we've opened the libraries again, we're now back at about 80% of our normal usage, which I think is a pretty good place to be, given we've only been open just over 6 weeks now. We do have a home library service, so for those people that can't get to the library, we do deliver books and other materials to them, and that's largely delivered through volunteers as well. And we want to make sure that we keep using new technology to make sure that we can adapt and grow and provide residents with the services they expect. The last slide, and I think it's probably something that we'll be talking a lot about in the questions in this meeting, is around a new library offer. So the library offer was put in place in 2016. We've had it for 5 years. It's probably fair to say if we hadn't had COVID, we'd have been doing this work about a year ago to think about what's next for the library offer. There's a rough outline there of both the discovery phases, the strategy development phase, and then delivery phase about what we're going to be doing. But it's really important to do the detailed work in the discovery phase to make sure that we're looking at the things that are going to benefit our residents in terms of services. It's really interesting to think back to 2015-16 when we were doing the first library offer. And there were two particular challenges or opportunities that were put forward to the library service. One was that everyone uses Kindles or something like that. In 5 years' time, people won't be using books. And one was we can do things like have unstaffed libraries, which were becoming slightly more common in some countries throughout Europe. Research on both of those indicated that they weren't a good fit for the council, and actually residents wanted to retain books as a primary stock type while still making use of technology, and that actually having libraries that were staffed and had people there to connect with is also equally as important. So there will be things like that we'll be challenging and researching and digging deep into as we develop a new library offer. So that's the presentation that I've got, and I will happily take any questions.
Any questions, members? Thank you very much for that. Very interesting. Clive.
Thank you, Guy, and sorry I was late.
No problem. I got your note at least, so I was able to give your apologies at the start.
Yeah, thank you. Mark, you just put up there, it's the first time we've seen it, but some ideas for a new offer.
Mm-hmm.
I assume you're going to send that to members so we can have a look at it. What I was going to suggest mainly probably to Bill, was that we have a cross-party working group to help shape the update of the library offer, and perhaps we could use some of the councillors who were involved in the arts and craft working group, because I think that was a very successful working group that seems to have worked very well. I just wondered, really, Bill, what you thought of it. That's perhaps not a question for you, Mark, it's more for Bill.
Yes, I think I'm quite happy for a cross-party working group to look at that, and it's something I'll come back to you on.
Okay, thanks very much. Can we also have a look at opening some of the bigger libraries on Sunday? We do have Sunday opening at the moment, don't we, in Woodley?
Yes.
Yep. And it's used pretty well. There's 100 people use it, I think. And I wondered if there was, when we open the new library in Wokingham, whether there would be a possibility for opening that on a Sunday. And would we consider doing a consultation with local residents to see if they wanted to do that? And if we were going to do a consultation, can we make sure that it's in school term time, when children might actually be using the library rather than in holidays?
Certainly. I mean, starting at the beginning of that, Clive, thank you for that. Certainly when we developed the library offer 5 years ago, we wanted to be as inclusive as possible in getting input and expertise and ideas into that work. It's certainly included Scrutiny last time. It's included a wide range of members and the executive in sort of approving the consultation that we used. More input is the merrier really for us on that. So I think that's something we could definitely support. In terms of Sunday opening, it's something that we always look at in terms of making sure our libraries are open at the times when people want them. That's why we've moved away from having opening in the evenings, when actually they were getting less usage, in fact pretty low usage, and have put more openings on Saturdays. We do know that opening the new Wokingham Library on a Sunday would probably cost about £35,000 a year. And so that's something we need to consider within the council's budget process. But also I think you're right, understanding what usage residents might want to have of that on a Sunday. I think it could potentially be popular because the leisure centre will be open on a Sunday.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the leisure centre being next door, and people will use it, I'm sure. So I think we might find that it would be very popular.
What I'm always mindful of when thinking about extending services and how we shift library availability, obviously with the resources that we have, is that we don't in any way take away services or service availability from some of the smaller branches, because that's really, really important. And so if it was something that was going to be cost neutral, we might need to think about when during the week we didn't have Wokingham Library open, to have it open on Sundays is one of the things we might want to look at.
Yeah, wouldn't be too keen on not having it open during the week, just to be open on Sunday. Sure, it's something we'll have to look at.
Okay, thank you. Anne, I saw your hand shoot up, and I saw Norman.
All right, thank you.
Oh, and Alison.
Thanks very much. I think it's all very encouraging about the Wokingham libraries, compared to other libraries like in the, in Berkshire. they're a bit worrying. But what I was going to ask was the micro library in Shinfield. In its name, it sounds rather small. Is it of sufficient? Does it have sufficient sort of functionality for the population?
So it's within the Shinfield SDL, and it's going to have space in it for around about 1,500 books on the shelves. So it's certainly of comparable size to some of the smaller things we've done in the past, things like the Arborfield pop-up. It's certainly going to have a lot more books than that. It will have a self-service kiosk, and it will have the intelligent shelving. What's really encouraging about it is the conversations with the parish council, and actually how they're thinking about how some of the activities you might run through the library, such as like rhyme times and story times, could be incorporated into the operations of the centre. In a very real sense, when we do things like this, for example, in the Finchampstead Baptist Church Centre, we have about 30 or 40 parents with children attending rhyme time sessions on a Friday morning. Half of those people, when the sessions is finished, goes into the cafe in the FBC Centre and buy a cup of coffee and some cake and stay for a while. It's one of those things that is positively reinforcing both sets of activities around getting people visiting the library and making use of the community centre. And so that's the sort of thing we'll certainly want to try and build on and do within the Shinfield Centre as well.
Oh, right. So would the Wokingham Library Service tend to lead some of the activities, or would they tend to leave? Oh, they would. All right, that's good. And the other thing is just a minor thing, I hope, but on page 59, strategic planning of any changes. 1, 2, 3. The fourth bullet. It says a demonstration of how steps have been taken to mitigate the impact. It doesn't say what or.
Excuse me, trying to find.
59, and it's on planning of any changes. A demonstration of how steps have been taken to mitigate the impact, but I don't think it says what or.
I think it's the impact of any changes. So we need to understand what it is that we understand.
Of any changes.
Yeah.
Oh, right. But
I did take
it. Mitigate implies that there's something negative, doesn't it?
I did take this from the government website, so I will blame them for any poor grammar.
Oh, right. Okay.
It's a government page from an appendix, I think.
It's a what? Sorry, Guy.
I think it's a government page from an appendix, unless I'm mistaken it wrong. That's what the appendix is, correct?
Yeah. Oh, yes.
It is.
Right.
Okay. Right. So well, perhaps I'll never know.
So that you've discovered a government typo. Congratulations.
Maybe it's not something terrible that needs to be mitigated. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Norman, did you indicate? And then we'll go to Alison and then back to Clive.
Yes, I did. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Norman.
Hi. I'd just be interested. It's about the weekend opening again. Then you've given the busiest libraries on Saturdays and Sundays. I just wondered about the other libraries. For example, the early library. How well used that is on a Saturday. It would be interesting to have a bit more in terms of figures for the openings.
Certainly, I can provide you with that. We do have obviously usage data for all of our libraries. I mean, it's early is less well used than Wokingham and Woodley, but much better used than the rest of the libraries. It kind of sits a little bit sort of in the middle between the two. And yeah, I'll make sure that I give you the details around sort of the usage figures for Saturdays.
Okay, thank you. And just looking at the figures and sort of footfall and things, the larger libraries, Wokingham and Woodley especially, seem to be proportionately sort of better used. I just wonder about the strategy of having lots of little libraries. I mean, it's great to have them in the community and they're well used, but do you think people congregate more to the larger facilities, or is dispersed in having these micro ones the way to go?
I think it's what we're seeing is that the smaller libraries remain well used, but Wokingham and Woodley, and then to another extent, sort of Lower Early, are significantly better used in terms of visits. But the way I always view it is that we are a geographically quite dispersed borough. And I've been in the council long enough to know that there are lots of comments sometimes about what we do if we focus services too much on Woking and Woodley at the expense of other areas. And so I think it's part of that balance. It's also useful in terms of the libraries themselves are spaces within communities, and so they can be used for other activities within those. Most of our libraries, say, have used by things like local history societies and other sorts of groups, as well as a lot of children's activities for children and young people, which parents, particularly of younger children, find sort of really useful. So it's that balance that I think is an inherent strength of the library service.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you. I think it's really important that we do incorporate the arts strategy into the library offer. Libraries are far more than bookshops, free bookshops. They should be encouraging innovation and learning. So we really need to be working with the arts strategy to perhaps put things like makers spaces, into libraries. I mean, there's so much value that we can bring using them. So I do support Clive's suggestion of a working party, and I hope that's something that Bill will take up.
Coming back on that, thank you for that comment. Absolutely. What we want is libraries to always be more than a place for people to come and borrow books, and having a link to art and culture activities is incredibly important, not only in and of themselves, but also that then they can be gateways to other things in terms of encouraging learning and connection within sort of communities, again, particularly for sort of children and young people. I mean, Woking Library currently has space where we display artwork from local artists. We also encourage local authors as well. And that's certainly something that we'll be doing in the new Woking Library. The space specifically sort of there available for doing artistic exhibitions.
Thank you. Clive, you indicated again?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kai. Mark, if there are residents watching this tonight, I'm sure that many of them from the areas where we've got smaller libraries, Shinfield, Finchampstead, Twyford, will be very heartened to have heard your reply to Norman's question, which was very supportive of the smaller libraries. And I'm sure residents are going to be very pleased to hear that a senior officer here in the Borough Council is a strong advocate of keeping these libraries. So I think what you said was really good. But my question is, do you think, again, this might be for Bill as well, do you think it might be possible to consider working with Optimus to put a Alzheimer's cafe in the new library in Carnival Pool? Do you think that might be something that could be
looked at?
Well, I think
it's something perhaps the working party could certainly look at, and I think to think of an Alzheimer's cafe and certainly the use by the voluntary sector to make themselves more publicly aware is always something that's worth looking at. So yeah, we'll take that on and look at it as a working party.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I think as well on that, the cafe facility within the new Carnival Hub is going to be provided by a third-party provider in the space that's available, and so we probably need to work with them on some of the details on that. But making our libraries more accessible and how we can contribute towards our equalities agenda is absolutely something the library service does do and wants to do more on. We want to make our libraries autism friendly. We want to make sure that everyone feels confident and comfortable in visiting the libraries. And that's part of what the library service has done for as long as I've been involved with it.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I'm going to ask a couple of questions now and also make my thoughts known on this, because there's been a lot of conversation here tonight. I think there's a lot of energy and enthusiasm from members both in the chamber and outside the chamber wanting to support this. Wokingham's library strategy has been a testament to the success and the vision that was put down 5 years ago. and we're now basically moving beyond that. So in my head, what we're talking about is going beyond the library, because if we look at the data that's been provided to us tonight, the main people who are using libraries in terms of their age groups are children in education, and to be perfectly honest, it's then the parents. So we need to look beyond what those core groups are and basically increase, and this may need work. This is well beyond what Wokingham itself can do. This is a universal question about how libraries can be offered. But libraries are more than, they are a building, and their original purpose was basically to provide sources for education and learning. We are moving beyond that slightly. We're going back to the coffee house of the 16th and 17th century, of basically them being penny universities. Areas of, I feel we should make them areas of learning, education, art, culture, and make them thrive because of that. Examples of the Shinfield Microlibrary are an excellent example on that, because it's thinking beyond that brick and mortar building. And that's something that we need to potentially forget in this chamber today. There are core ones that we should have as brick and mortar buildings, yes, but we need to go beyond that as well. It's what is offered that is key. So that's where I feel. So I'm definitely going to be volunteering for that working party if I get the chance. But the key question is because there is one other library in the borough that has not been mentioned so far this evening, and it's actually the largest by far in the borough. Technically, there might be two. And that is, the first one is the University of Reading Library, which is technically within the borough by about 300 metres. So has any talk and conversation been gone to work with the University of Reading? Because I know that space is a premium at that, so there is a potential to offer our facilities to potentially the students from that point of view, but also it opens up a lot more for adult education and learning as well. And then the second library that just occurred to me is we have a massive archive of the British Museum here in the borough as well. I'm pretty certain they've got stuff in there that might be of interest. So has any conversations been going on with them about collaborating with local library services for educational purposes as well? Yeah, as you can see, I've had a lot of thinking about this one. So I'd just like to hear some answers on that.
Sure. We are in contact with Reading University. We've not had specific discussions around, I think, the sort of things you're mentioning there, Chair, but no doors or no ideas are ever closed in terms of the library service. We'd want to explore them if possible, if it's going to be a benefit to our residents. I'm happy to be able to say that, yes, we've been in contact with the archives, and before the pandemic we were talking around how we can align the outreach work that they want to do across the borough with the library service, and how that can also connect with schools. So those are conversations that are ongoing, and definitely a piece of work we want to get up and running.
And just to come in on that, you mentioned the schools. I assume that the communication is always ongoing with the schools in that regard, because, as I mentioned earlier, education is the key part here, because they are the largest user of the library, according to the data that we had, that and parents, which we all know is going on there. The kids are booking out their library books, and then the parents are getting the extra ones that they can't put on the card. I know, because I'm doing that.
You'd be surprised how many books you can get on one card. There's still quite a lot. Absolutely, we liaise with our children's services colleagues within the council. I'm going to shoehorn it in because I'm just always so proud of it. But we have a member of the library, an officer who does that sort of specifically, and they were sort of one of the key architects of the Authors into Schools project that was delivered in October and February just gone, where we had over, I think it was 13,000 attendances at events across those sort of 2 months. And that sort of thing is fantastic in of itself, but also I think equally fantastic within the context delivering in the pandemic. And those are things that we're always trying to do to make sure that our libraries have that added value in terms of supporting learning for our children and young people across the borough.
Thank you. I could go on this again for quite a while. So Shirley, I've just seen your hand shoot up.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to see that the Woodley Library is having lots of work done as part of the Climate Emergency Action Plan. And I wonder whether there would be an opportunity, once this work is complete and the solar panels and everything's up and running, to have some kind of display going on in the library, perhaps even on a permanent basis, showing how much electricity is being generated from the solar panels, how much is being fed into the grid, how a heat pump works, and kind of make a kind of an exhibition, if you like, of that kind of work that's going on in the library, because I think a lot of residents would find that really interesting.
That's about an idea. Well done. Thank you. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah.
Thank you, Norman.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back really on what Clive was saying. I was maybe a bit clumsy in what I was saying about the libraries. What I was trying to do was give Mark the opportunity to say something positive about the smaller libraries. Clearly, he took that, and I think that was my intention in doing that. So apologies if I was a bit clumsy in my wording. I think one of the things in this borough, there's been a lot of innovation over the last few years, which has helped us get ahead of the curve in terms of the amount of use of our library facilities, not just the libraries, but all the services that we offer. And I think it's good that we're thinking about the future and improving further on what's gone on in the last few years. So very much support what Mark and his colleagues are doing. It's great. Thank you.
I think you got a universal acclamation from my point of view on that. Agreeing with Norman. You guys have done a fantastic job, and the numbers on page, what page was it again? 51 speak for themselves. We are the only Berkshire authority to show a growth. Yes, it's basically been 3.3%, but everyone else, the average that I'm seeing on those numbers is more like 20 to 25% in that regard. So now it's the case going forward, and I think it's that. And I looked at Bill here as well, because I think we've maybe exhausted the questions this evening. It's basically to move the strategy going forward, and if a working group could be made, I want to be on it. Be slightly selfish here from the chair, but it's be good to basically build something up and then bring it back to this committee in the future. Because I think whatever we had to do, we'd have to go out to a public consultation if it's a major one, so that we can basically see how it's progressing and basically operate it like we've been doing with the arts and culture strategy for the last few months in that regard. That's what I would like to see anyway. Bill.
Yeah, thank you. I think you're right. I think, we've got a population in Wokingham who are using our services, and it's our duty to support them and to improve them all the way, so that that continued growth in the use by our residents maintained fully. So yeah, I think with the working party, we will look at all the aspects, the possibilities of how we can even now make improvements to what is already a pretty good service. So I think that's the way we need to go. We've got to support our residents in their desire to visit our libraries.
Chairman, if I may, since we're talking about the library service, I do want to take the opportunity just to say that the vast majority of everything the library service delivers in terms of its successes are down to the officers that deliver it. It's so a little bit, really in many senses, it is me, it's them. They work tirelessly and they're incredibly innovative, and always come up with ideas for things to improve. So I'm eternally grateful to them, and thank you for the the praise that's been delivered to the library service tonight, because it's down to them.
Indeed, and I'm seeing notes on the chat internally here as well on the screen coming in from other members who are watching on the on live stream this evening, noting that congratulations as well. And I've got notes coming in here from here, because I believe my dear wife has been watching as well, so I've had a note come in from her as well. So that the praise is well earned. I think it's a case of working together now to drive this forward and try and deliver something that builds on the success from the last 5 years and basically shows. Let's aim high. Let's show the rest of the country how it's done. as everyone suddenly starts throwing things at me, but that's beside the point. Mark, thank you very much for your time this evening, and thanks to other officers attending in support on this. This has been really useful, and I look forward to hearing more from yourself and Bill going forward and bringing this back to the committee eventually. So I think we can move on from that one. So Mark, off you go. You can enjoy yourself now for the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
And Bill can probably disappear as well. So we'll move on to the next item of the agenda, which is the meeting schedule, I believe. So Callum, do you want to start speaking?
Yes, I'll just take you members through this very quickly. So 6th of October is, as you can see on your agenda, page 64. So that is essentially confirmed at this stage. You'll notice on the following page, the chairman has agreed.
Wasn't entirely my fault, I'm afraid, everyone.
has agreed an extraordinary meeting on the 3rd of November. This was to fit in with some of the directors' workloads and being able to attend the particular meeting where their budgets were being discussed. So if hopefully you can all make it on the 3rd of November, if not, obviously substitutes would be welcome. And I'm looking to schedule perhaps one other item. I've got a couple of emails sent out to other officers to try and get something else to go to that meeting. Moving on from that, the ordinary meeting on the 24th of November. Again, we've got medium-term financial plan and an update about overgrown pavements. Now, the officers for that have requested just a little bit of additional sort of scope here from members as to what kind of things would you like them to talk about? Because I remember before, members were keen that this wasn't just a plaster approach to the issue, but perhaps coming up with more of a strategy around dealing with this. So I just wondered if that was still the intention of members.
Paul?
Yes, it was. I brought it up previously because there's footways which are covered with overgrown vegetation, and occasionally they get cut back when their reports are put in, but there's no follow-up on a continuous basis to get these cleared. And so that's one particular strategy, is looking at that. And how are they reported as well? I think we need to be looking at that to make sure that the public can actually report them properly, because I know there's some issues in the system, because some residents contacted me the other week about reporting in a particular way, and they seem to go into a bit of a black hole and they don't get anything back, and there's some issues on the website as well. So it's around that, really, making sure footways are cleared right back from curb to boundary, and keeping them cleared back. I think it's that sort of area. That's helpful.
That sounds logical to me, Paul. And the other aspect that you're asking for, and this may be me making it a metaphor, is effectively like the road repair program, as it were. Basically, when is something, what is the category of overgrown, rather from a proactive point of view, as opposed to that path there is overgrown, please cut it, please. So basically a proactivity as opposed to reactivity, correct?
Yeah, it's part of the inspection regime,
yeah.
You know. So highway inspectors, are they picking them up? Should they be picking them up? How do they carry out their inspections? Are they walking these footways?
Yeah.
And also town paths and footpaths which are not adjacent to the carriageway, but link between a footway and an estate.
Yeah.
those seem to get missed off an awful lot.
Yeah,
and I have lots of complaints about those.
Yeah, what I refer to as a bridleway, where
Yeah,
back down my parents, where it went 22 years between getting cut. So yeah, it's not a universal problem, but that would also be also a very good, the bridleway, what I refer to as bridleway traffic, basically shortcuts and cut throughs and everything like that. It'd be also interesting to know how they are dealt with the winter and the autumn, with all the leaf fall process around that as well, because there's a lot of mulch some places. Paul?
If I just come back on bridleways, rights of way are different. You have footpaths, public footpaths and bridleways and byways.
It's just what I call them in my head.
Rucks and boats, and they tend to go across the open countryside fields, which is a bit different to what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
This is the urban side of getting the footway and the footpath.
Yeah.
And linking. It's
just my term, Paul. It's what I refer to it as.
Making sure that they are clear, because we've got an LC WIP, local cycle walking and infrastructure plan going forward, encouraging more people to walk, and we need to keep those clear. Yeah, it's around that.
Fair enough.
Yeah, very useful. Thank you very much. I will go back to the officers with that. We then move on to so December looks a bit blank at the moment, but fear not, I will schedule some items for that. Bill?
Let me put my mic on. Yeah, you've got in October, you've got a PPP verbal update, and there's nothing more. Now, bearing in mind that we exit the PPP on the 1st of April, I think, can I make a suggestion that we have a further update nearer the 1st of April? We've got nothing. We've got the domestic abuse contract in 28th of March, but that's part of PPP. But perhaps another update prior to the actual exiting might be worth. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I believe there was a couple of conversations, because there was nothing further to update as of this meeting, because we were originally talking about it at this meeting, and there's conversations going on all the time from what I was hearing in regards to that. So it's basically a case of, Bill, if there's anything that comes up that you feel is within the committee's remit, and I know that officers will also keep me honest as well, that's when we can do a verbal update. But yeah, we need to, just keeping abreast of those. So I think it's basically a standing item just in case we need it right now. But right now, there has been nothing. You're correct.
Okay, thank you.
So does the PPP, would that come into January when we're looking at in-house and public facing services update?
That might not be a bad idea.
I mean, the definition is we're bringing it in-house, and because we want to improve the public facing service of it.
That's not a bad idea, Bill. It's fine. Again, if there is anything, just please do let us know and we'll squeeze it in, because it is important. But most important of all, as was said in the last meeting, the staff in the PPP. They're the people who need to be taken care of first and foremost, and they need to know things before us.
I can assure you that is already being dealt with.
Good.
Yes, thank you, Bill. Yeah, and good spot, Alison. That part of that item is building control, as suggested by Steve last time. So yeah, we can tie that in with PPP in January. Where was I? So yep, December. I'm in the process of scheduling things. January is looking busy, as is March, and then you'll see my note at the bottom there. I'm discussing with officers a variety of other items as well, and just trying to put them in the appropriate time frame. And then just a final reminder again, invites will be going out soon for the budget scrutiny training on the Monday, the 27th of September, and that will be virtual. So that's open to all overview and scrutiny members. So the invitations will be going out for that soon.
Shirley?
Thank you. I just wondered, looking at the 28th of March, and we've got a 6-month update on the domestic abuse contract. Now, I recall that there was a bit of a furore about the new domestic abuse provider, because they didn't have a refuge. And I just wonder whether we could have a mini update, perhaps in December, just to say, you know, to see how that's progressing, whether they've now got a refuge, how that's panning out, because it would be, you know, it would be awful to get to March and find that that was still really not, you know, they hadn't got a refuge and things were going badly.
We'll chase that, I think, because that is an important note, and we can at least circulate a note to the committee at the very least. And if we can, we got just to terrify everyone, 3 months until December now. So we got time to then chuck it in later at the next meeting. But yeah, we'll get, and we need an update on that.
Thank you.
Right, we got a full agenda, everyone. The extraordinary meeting was not entirely my fault. I was asked by officers and the executive member for finance for an additional one for proper scrutiny. So you can't blame me for this one. With that, I'd like to thank everyone for attending tonight, and I will close the meeting at just gone 9:05. Thank you very much, everyone. To those who are watching, thank you very much for watching this evening. Have a very good evening. And to everyone else, thank you very much.